Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. It's time to have a look at update 2.31.1.49. This update came out yesterday. It's not huge, but also there's a bunch of stuff that's going on in War Thunder that isn't really being covered in the changelogs, so I think it's worth talking about. The first one is of course night battles, which was talked about previously, where they'd increased the frequency of them turning up. I've heard now that players are actually finding them, which is awesome. That's, something that is really good, so people can get those rewards, and people can also just enjoy that part of the game. A lot of people talked about, when I've talked about night battles, that I'm very much against them, and generally, yes, I am, because you can just turn them off when it comes to filters in the game. But the problem that I've always had when it comes to that stuff is third-party things. The fact that you can use third-party stuff to go after it. That doesn't mean that I don't, want them in the game. It's more I would actually just like those filters disabled so you can't use them in War Thunder itself. The only issue with doing this is obviously it would be a negative effect on people that rely on those filters, especially if they're partially sighted, or especially if they are used to, a certain way of the game looking. But at the end of the day, I think it is a worthwhile thing to do if you want to implement this system. At some point, somebody loses out, and in this current situation, who loses out is, of course, the people trying to get it done. So, it is kind of how it is. Let's have a look at the ground vehicles portion, see what's going on. They did a bunch of changes to reloading, which is kind of interesting to see. Fixed the automatic gun loader, the idle reload cycle, where it was impossible to shoot even though a shell was loaded into the gun. That has been fixed. They also fixed the incorrect reload time multiplier, which is nice to see too. Seems like they've decided that the UI in the battles is important to fix after fixing the crew replenishment thing, now fixing the ammunition thing. There was also a bug where the gun could start reloading even though the first stage ammo storage was still empty. That's been fixed on automatic gun loaders. I always thought it was kind of interesting what would happen in that setup. I suppose the fact is the crew still has to put the round in the ammo carousel, but there must be some autoloaders where you can also manually load them at the same time. I've always wondered if they could, switch that up. It was kind of like the thing that we've talked about before, the idea of being able to, once a shell is loaded into a breach, being able to remove it and then put in another shell. But my solution to that has always been, well, just add a button to the game where the loader doesn't load a shell until you actually select the shell to load. That, I think, would actually make more sense, especially it gets around the problem of, breaches not being able breaches not being able to be, or shells not being able to take out of the breach. Sorry, that was a bit all over the place. So then we have the aircraft. There was a bug that caused some aircraft in helicopters to incorrectly display gun caliber and the amount of ammunition in X-ray mode. That's been fixed, which is good. And then on the interface, a bug where the language selected on Steam and not in the game settings was the language used in-game. That's been fixed as well. Locations-wise, there was a bug that made it possible to drive into buildings, and that had been damaged by artillery, and some maps had been fixed, so basically you could just drive into stuff and disappear. One of my favorite bugs when it came to this stuff was when the Magacs came out, the Israeli Magacs, the M48s and 60s. There was a few of them where you could actually, the hull didn't have a collision model, so you could literally just hide the hull inside of a wall somewhere, and then basically fight from that point. It was so weird to actually deal with. There was also another fix, which was a bug that caused a difference in the position of missiles on the client and server, has been fixed as well. The interesting thing to me was, over the last few days, I've been reading a lot about the Labor of Love stuff and trying to get different people's opinions on it. Obviously reading the comments section from yesterday, reading the Steam comments, and then also, of course, other pieces of social media. And one of the things that is constantly brought up is this idea that Gaijin doesn't really do a lot to the game. There's a lot of bare minimum comments, but the thing is, if you have a look at like these types of changelogs, that really isn't the case, right? You usually get 2 or 3 changelogs a week. You also have events going on all the time. It's really weird for me to see people say stuff like that, because I think of games like even War Game, right? Wargame Red Dragon, which basically went for years with nothing moving with it, or even I recently, well not recently, but over the last few years I played through the Battlefield 1 and also Battlefield 5 campaigns, just because they were on EA Play. And the Battlefield 5 campaigns, in 2 of them, I ran into 2 game-breaking bugs where I couldn't do anything, and those were single-player campaigns. And then also in Alien Isolation, I ran into at least one game-breaking bug in the first few hours, where there is this room where some enemies are sat, and you are basically with a NPC who's kind of showing you around, and he was like, okay, we've got to be quiet, and then he would storm into the room and just get himself shot in the head, and we would lose. And when it reloaded, he just did the same thing again. And I just feel like, okay, so these games have been out for this long, and those things haven't been fixed. And when it comes to War Thunder, you have this ever-evolving game and a lot of stuff going on with it, and it's just really hard to... I feel like what we need to do is people need to go to places like Humble Bundle or Fanatical and need to take like a sabbatical for a month or two when it comes to War Thunder. You know, some of these guys have played for like 1,500, 5,000, 7,000 hours and are just generally not happy with it. Just sit down, have a look at like Fanatical, which is a website which does game bundles. Pick one up, because you can pick one up for like $10 and get like 5 games, and just play through those games, Try something different, enjoy yourself, and have a good time. Or even with like the Steam sales going on, right? There's a ton of games which are like, $5 to really enjoy and just have a great time with. And then kind of work out whether, you want to do that, or whether you want to do the whole War Thunder thing again. That, at least to me, is something that I think is important. Having a bit more of a different perspective by trying to play different things. It's one of the things that I try and do, even though, time is limited nowadays. I like playing other stuff just to see how they do things and also try and keep up with the news on different things. Like yesterday, we played the Lethal Company game, which was super fun, but also a completely different experience. And I feel like War Thunder, one of the things it does really well at is the solo angle, which stuff like Lethal Company can't really do very well because it's more team-based, but still quite a lot of fun. I just wish that going forward, if people are really struggling with something, I always think it's best, instead of just trying to keep hammering down with it in a video game, the best thing to do is instead just try and play something else for a bit and see how you feel. Because that is the great thing about nowadays. There's so many different games all over the place. And that doesn't mean that you don't play stuff like War Thunder. It means that you just try some other stuff, during the same time. Don't just get pigeonholed into playing one thing. Talking about playing one thing, though, there is something that is a little bit odd when it comes to War Thunder, and that's map rotation. A lot of people have brought this one up, and I experienced it yesterday, where in Enlisted, it decided to stick me on the same map about 5 times in a row, which was one of the worst ground-pounding maps while I was doing a special task. And there definitely seems to be some kind of timer on this now. Before, there definitely used to be as well, but now it's way more pronounced. So the idea is, like, in this 30-minute slot or an hour slot, like, you play this, and then it switches over to a different map. It's super weird, and it's something I've noticed in the past where people would leave games a lot and then join, again, and you would get a different game but on the same map, but now it's way more pronounced compared to what it was. So if you're having similar things, let me know, so we can kind of find out if it's a bug or not, or if it's intended, because I didn't see anything when it came to the changes about this, but it is way more prevalent than it was previously. As always, though, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank Brendan Quinn, Vilneus, Character Fuel, Juan the Panda, Carrion Crow, Gus Irenicus, Pyman, Merciless Reaper, Orange Tail, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Moxie, B. Young, Bareen, Peter Grayling, Alan Hacker, Sem Alslan, Uncle Bean, and Derek R., and also Lafouche for supporting the channel.